You like to accuse me of having a cold heart, Bianca said lightly. Let's see how yours handles the temperature. The steel door slammed. A hollow boom rolled through the room, then silence, then the thin hiss of air at sub-zero. Metal bit my palms when I struck the door. Frost bloomed where my breath hit the dark. Somewhere beyond the insulated walls, forklifts whined and then faded. In here there was only the blue pulse of a thermometer and the ache of cold climbing my wrists like a slow tide. People call me Ellie Eleanor Marlowe on official forms. I turned 70 last spring, buried my husband Leonard in the summer, and by autumn my son Daniel and his new wife moved into the house with a flock of reassurances. We'll handle the errands, we'll drive you to appointments, you shouldn't worry about bills. I wanted to believe them. I even did for a while. The first real crack came 3 months ago. I paused in the hallway by my study because I heard my own name roll through the door in a voice not meant for me. Bianca was on the phone, very calm. 87 million liquid if we do it right. Trust dividends the works. She's slipping, she just doesn't know it yet. Once Daniel inherits, I'll manage the rest. I stood there with a saucer cooling in my hand and felt the ground tilt. Leonard and I had built our life carefully over 45 years. Never showy, always documented, every decimal checked twice. Slipping wasn't the word I would have chosen for myself. After that, small things started migrating. My reading glasses, always tucked beside the piano metronome, turned up in the laundry room behind a stack of towels. My morning pills, which I laid out each Sunday in a blue plastic strip, were swapped and rearranged. Bianca clucked her tongue like a nurse when I hesitated. The mantel clock in my bedroom stopped. The plug was mysteriously loose. At church book club, Annabelle said she'd missed me last week. I hadn't been told there was a meeting. The next day, the bank manager called to confirm I'd asked about closing a CD. I hadn't. When I answered my own doctor's questions, Bianca often stepped in with soft corrections. She's been a bit forgetful. She gets turned around. It's normal at her age. The words made a neat little box with my name on it, and day by day she tried to fit me inside. I made my mistake on a Wednesday. I was reviewing quarterly statements at the desk. Leonard's father built walnut-deep drawers a scratch by the right handle that looks like a tiny comet when Bianca came in without knocking. You don't need to wrestle with those, she said, already reaching. Her nails were glossy and immaculate, the kind that have never met a sponge. Daniel and I can simplify everything. These accounts are in my name alone, I said, sliding the file back toward me, and I am perfectly able to read them. For a heartbeat, her smile slipped. Something precise and sharp looked out through her eyes. Of course. I only meant it might be overwhelming. For someone your age. I'd heard that phrase a lot lately in a grocery line when I counted exact change at the pharmacy, when I asked about side effects printed in 6-point font. Thorough had been rebranded as failing. Bianca, I said, taking off my glasses so she could see I wasn't blinking. I know exactly what you're doing. I don't understand, she replied, voice pure syrup. But the temperature in the room seemed to fall. You're curating accidents, moving what I need. Narrating me into confusion, collecting witnesses. I heard your call. She went very still. No one will believe you. Dr. Rowan is concerned. The neighbors think you've been withdrawn. Daniel is worried. He is trying to save you from yourself. Pack your things, I said, both of you. You'll leave tomorrow. My voice sounded steadier than my hands. I'll speak to my attorney at 9. Her laugh was almost pitying. Do you really imagine a judge will take your word over medical notes and a dozen kind people who've noticed you're not the woman you were? You're building a case for me without even knowing it. That evening, Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway with a look I recognized from his little boy years, the expression he wore when a teacher had told him 2 conflicting rules, and he wanted to obey both. Mom B says you 2 argued, he began carefully. She's worried. I am too. You've missed things. Mick B mixed things up. Daniel, I said your wife is moving pieces around the board and then telling you I can't play. It sounded wild even to me. That's the cleverness of it. The truth wears the costume of hysteria. I think he said, staring at the grout line between tiles, maybe we should let Dr. Rowan do a cognitive screen, just to rule things out. Fine, I said. Next week. I needed time to steady the ground under my feet. The following morning, Bianca arrived bright as a showroom and said, "Let me take you out. I want to show you the warehouse we've expanded. You'll be proud." She ran an event rental outfit linens, folded like origami racks of glassware, chiming softly as we passed crates labeled with weddings and corporate initials. The loading bay smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cold metal. This, she said, pausing at a door the size of a vault, is my favorite, the blast chiller. Keeps ice sculptures and gel packs perfect. The handle shone like a polished bone. I shouldn't have stepped closer. I did anyway. Old habits admire the engineering, ask a question, learn something new. The air that spilled out was wicked cold and startlingly dry. A hand touched the small of my back, polite guiding. The smallest push. My shoe caught on the threshold. I turned and the door was already swinging. "Bianca," I said. She spoke through the narrowing gap in a voice that would photograph beautifully. "Relax, Ellie, I'll handle the paperwork." The latch swallowed light. I was alone with the hum of the compressor and the throb of my heart. Shelves lined the walls with tubs of prepared gel, sealed crates a coil of silver hose. My breath crystallized a tiny snowfall. The thermometer read, "But Sensation retreated from my fingers as if my hands were being erased. I pressed my palms to the door until they burned. Then I forced myself to look, not panic, to inventory. On the wall above a crate of ice packs, something glinted under a strip of frost, a reflective handle and an orange emergency kit bolted to the metal. The foil blanket rasped like dry leaves as I tore open the orange kit. I shook it out, tucked the crinkled silver under my coat and over my chest, then sat on a crate to get my feet off the steel floor. Leonard used to say, "Cold climbs, not falls. You buy time by lifting yourself out of its reach." I breathed into my cupped hands until pins and needles returned, then reached for the chrome lever mounted beside the inspection tag. It wasn't locked freezers like this aren't coffins unless someone intends them to be. I pressed the interior release just enough to hear the latch loosen and let the door sigh open 2 fingers width. A blade of warmer air slid in. The thermometer's blue tick began to crawl. If Bianca had counted on panic, she had miscounted. I could wait. The kit held a whistle, a chem light, a multi-purpose tool. I cracked the glow stick and laid it near the threshold to see the faint plume of condensate drift inward. If the door started to swing shut, I would see the glow dim. I pulled the hood of my coat up, wrapped the blanket tighter, and began the slow arithmetic of minutes, stretch, flex, count, breathe. I told myself names of loved things in alphabetical order: apricots, Bach partitas, cardinals on snow, Daniel at 6 with a missing tooth. The list steadied my hands. When the numbness dulled to ache, I stood and scanned the walls again. Above a bin of ice packs, an OSHA placard listed inspection dates with Bianca's initials in a tidy column. I took my phone from my inner pocket, warm from my body heat, 43% battery, and photographed the placard, the interior handle, the inspection seal with today's date visible. If someone later called this an accident, the photos could argue back. I counted to 300 twice before easing the door wider and slipping out. The kitchen beyond was cavernous stainless tables in ranks, plastic curtains breathing in the faint current. I pulled the door to without letting it latch and slid a gel pack into the jamb, a tiny spacer invisible unless you were looking for it. Cold would leak, the compressor would labor, no one would ask why for at least an hour. Beyond the prep area lay the office, a glass cube tucked behind racks of linen. I moved there with the slowness that keeps noise small. Bianca's desk was a tableau of efficiency label maker, pen caddy, a ledger with color-coded tabs. On the monitor, the sleep screen showed a field of yellow tulips. A sticky note on the bezel said, "Girasole Italian" for sunflower. She had a fondness for cute passwords. The keyboard woke to a login prompt. Girasole didn't work, but Girasole 24 did. Desktop folders bloomed, accounts, vendors, HR care. Inside care, I found templates for medication compliance logs, home safety checklists, and one labeled marlow.consent.pdf. I opened it. A power of attorney form with my name pre-filled the signature line, waiting like an empty plate. I photographed the screen. Then I pressed print to see if she'd left a paper trail. The laser hummed once and delivered 3 copies into the tray. On the top page, a square of faint blue reflected microdot watermark from a third-party legal form vendor. Useful. Another folder, insurance, held scanned applications with different surnames in the same neat handwriting. In a subfolder labeled ELM sat a draft for a policy in Daniel's favor to cover estate expenses. I sent PDFs to a fresh thumb drive from the desk drawer and photographed each screen with my phone for redundancy angles wide enough to include the taskbar clock and the office wall calendar. Paper hides where people are lazy. Bianca wasn't lazy, but she was proud. Pride makes people keep trophies. Second drawer on the left, a bound notebook, gridded pages, black elastic. Not a diary, a log. Short entries with dates and check marks. Glasses relocated. Spoke with Dr. R, screening next to. Auntie A remarked on Ellie, seeming tired. Good. I flipped until I found today's date. Warehouse tour, finish. I put the notebook in my coat. On a hook behind the door, a key ring with labeled plastic tags clinked under my fingers. Box truck front gate, showroom office. No house key. She wasn't that careless. But people who curate perfection forget the edges of their stage. The reception counter kept a visitor bowl with peppermint candies and a stack of glossy trifold brochures. Under the brochures, a business card for a locksmith with a handwritten note porch box installed BM. I took a picture of the number and the note. I heard the warehouse bay door rumble open, then heels on concrete. I killed the monitor, slid along the shadow of a rack, and folded myself behind a stack of banquet chairs, phone ready. Bianca's voice drifted in controlled breath, then a modulation I recognized from church soloists practiced emotion. Ellie, are you in here? The pitch was mothering, a shade too bright. She crossed to the freezer. The door thumped fully open, then a beat of silence. She produced the gasp I'd imagined for her, and I thumbed my phone to record. Oh my God. Oh God. A beat and then the practiced articulation of numbers. 911, please. I'm at Marlowe Event Rentals, 1189 South Oriole. My mother-in-law, she must have gotten confused. The freezer I just found. I had a view of her shoes through the chair legs, nude pumps, a scratch at the toe. I lowered the phone and listened to the dispatcher guide her through the performance. Is the patient breathing? I don't know. Do not touch the scene. Yes, of course. The siren took 7 minutes. Paramedics went in and out. Their boots left clean rectangles in a faint dusting of flour near the prep line. A uniformed officer stood in the doorway and wrote notes, nodding at whatever Bianca poured into the air with tears shimmering on cue. When the ambulance and cruiser left the warehouse, settled into the hum again, Bianca called someone in a lower voice, roughened from crying. She must have wandered in. Daniel, no, don't drive yet. They told me to wait for the detective. It's bad. She listened, said, I don't know, and I'll call you back. And finally, I love you. Then disappeared into the office. The printer chattered again. She was making packets. I waited for the second wave, the detective who took a cursory look and promised a follow-up, the EMT who returned to retrieve a bag. When it was quiet for 10 more minutes, I slid out from the chairs and moved to the office doorway. Bianca had left. A to-go tissue, wet and twisted, sat beside the stapler. On the desk, 3 tidy stacks, incident statement, consent care plan. I fanned the top sheets and photographed the signatures. Mine forged cleanly in a loop I'd practiced for 30 years. She'd studied my hand like a language and spoken it back at me. I left the office as I'd found it. In the freezer, the gel pack still held the door ajar a breath's width. I removed it, let the latch take, and wiped my fingerprints from the chrome with the corner of the foil blanket before tucking the blanket flat inside the kit. The chem light I pocketed. The hum deepened. Temperature would fall. Her story would congeal around the vacancy she had invented. Outside, the afternoon had thinned to a pale gold. I crossed the lot along the strip where truck tires had polished the asphalt, avoiding muddy prints. Down the block, I hailed a cab by raising my hand the way my mother taught me in the city elbow, straight eyes certain. The driver glanced in the mirror, said nothing, and put on the radio softly. I gave him a grocery store address, 6 blocks from Daniel and Bianca's townhouse, and watched the grid of streets scroll by. My breath fogged the window only once. I wiped it with my sleeve and felt for the first time all day, not cold, but sharpened. At the store, I bought 2 things, a pack of plain cotton handkerchiefs and a small roll of clear tape. On the walk to the townhouse, I called my lawyer's service and left a message without adjectives, name, time, place. I need you on the line at 5, then hung up before warmth could make my voice betray me. The locksmith's card hadn't lied. At the left of Bianca's porch, screwed into brick behind a potted rosemary that tried too hard to be Mediterranean, a black key safe sat like a little grave marker. The code for such boxes, in my experience, is birthday zip codes, or the word the installer suggested on the invoice. Girasole fit on the push-button pad if you mapped letters to numbers like an old phone. I tried 447277653 with my heart beating like a metronome at Allegro. The lid opened to reveal a brass key with a red dot of enamel. Inside, the townhouse smelled of lemon cleaner and lilies. I washed my hands at the sink, dried them on a towel, patterned with sunflowers, and set the notebook, the printed forms, and the thumb drive on the coffee table in a fan, each page squared to the edge. I taped one handkerchief to the underside of the table lip, where a person's knee would nudge it and feel the fabric and look down. I poured water into a glass tap first, then the filtered lever because Bianca believes in appearances, and sat in the armchair Leonard always refused because it squeaked. Daniel's graduation photo watched from the mantel. His cap crooked my hand at his back. I put my phone face down on the cushion beside me and listened to the house breathe. The clock in the hall ticked. The radiator clicked. Somewhere outside, a child laughed and a dog answered. I folded my hands and let stillness arrive one measured breath at a time while the pages on the table waited in their neat array. The front lock turned a bright click against the hush. Heels crossed the tile sure and unhurried, and then Bianca stepped into the living room with her phone in her palm and composure arranged like pearls at her throat. She saw me, and the pearls snapped no sound, only the sudden looseness in her face as if gravity had changed. "Hello, Bianca," I said. I didn't stand. Water, I lifted my glass a little. My hands were steady now. She took a half step back until her shoulders touched the door. For one breath she looked younger, almost blank like a singer before the first note. Then the mask returned. "Ellie," she said, smoothing nothing down the front of her blouse. "Thank God." Where have you?" "Daniel is on his way," I said. "He'll be relieved to see I'm not an inventory item." Her eyes moved to the coffee table and snagged the notebook with gridded pages, the printed consent, the thumb drive, the photos of the freezer handle, and inspection placard, each page squared to the edge. She didn't reach for anything. She didn't blink. "You've broken into my office. You locked me into your freezer." I tilted the top sheet so light caught the faint watermark. "Let's not trade definitions." A smile tried to grow and thought better of it. "You're confused," she said gently, and managed to make the sentence sound like a hug. "You wandered. You frightened yourself. I've been on the phone with emergency services all afternoon. I recorded your call," I said. I tapped my phone and let a slice play her gasp, the address, the soft theatrical tremor. "You follow instructions beautifully." She stared at the phone as if it might burn her. "If you have some grievance, we can discuss it when Daniel arrives. We are discussing it now." I slid the notebook farther toward her without letting it leave my reach. Today's entry. Warehouse tour. Finish. Your hand is tidy. Your dates are careful. The way you check a box is very distinctive. "I don't know what that is," she said. The pitch was clinical now, the nurse's tone when she's calling security and keeping you calm. "It sat in your second drawer on the left," I answered. "Behind the label maker tape and 3 gel pens that have never written a shopping list." Her gaze ticked sideways toward the kitchen. I'd seen that look on cats considering leaps. "Don't," I said. "You know I backed everything up, several somewhere." She believed that. Fear made a small curtsy in her throat. The lock turned again. Shoes ran down the front steps and scrambled the last 2, and then Daniel filled the doorway with the breathless disorder of someone who has been told too many incompatible things and sprinted anyway. He wore no coat, just a sweater gone sweaty at the collar. When he saw me, his hands opened and closed like someone remembering how to hold. "Mom," he said, and the word came out a question and an apology at once. "I'm here," I said. He looked at Bianca. B said, "She called, I thought." He stopped, swallowed, and tried again. "What happened?" Bianca moved first, quick and supple. "She turned up," she said, and even now she couldn't help the brightness, the competence. I found her wandering near the storefronts on Oriole after I'd already called 911. "She's cold, she's disoriented." "I'm not," I said. "Daniel," she continued over me, "your mother needs a hospital. Please, we can have Dr. Rowan meet us." "Look," I said, and shifted the notebook so it faced my son. "Read." I didn't add please. He was a man. He could choose. Daniel came closer. He turned pages with the caution of a museum visitor, 2 fingers to the top corner. He read silently, glasses relocated, spoke with Dr. R, screening next to. Auntie A remarked good. His throat worked. He flipped back a month, then forward to today. He didn't look at Bianca. He didn't look at me. He only read until the shape of the days rearranged themselves. Ellie forged that Bianca said, quiet and appalled, "This is what I've been telling you, paranoia likes paper." Daniel set the notebook down like something that might bruise. He reached for the printed consent, held it under the lamp. Mom's signature. He nodded at the loop on the E and the way the L rose taller than the H, except the flourish on the W crosses itself. She doesn't do that. He wasn't a handwriting expert. He was a son who had watched me sign orchestra permission slips and mortgage renewals and birthday cards for 40 years. He looked at the photos. "What is this?" he asked, and the question was addressed to the air. "Your wife's freezer," I said. "The interior release, the inspection mark with her initials, the temperature gauge. Your mother was in that room today. I kept my pronouns simple and my verbs exact." Bianca made a choking sound that could have been a laugh or a sob. "She's staging a drama because she doesn't want help. We talked about this, Dan. She's frightened of getting older, and fear makes people vindictive." "Play it," Daniel said without raising his voice. I knew which file he meant. I pressed the screen again. Her 911 performance filled the room, a little too polished in the consonants. He didn't look at her while it played. He watched the carpet. When the recording ended, he bent at the knees and put one hand on the coffee table, and his left knee nudged the underside, brushed the taped handkerchief. He frowned, reached under, felt the fabric, and found the edge of the tape. He peeled it free and held the square in his hand like a note he hadn't expected in a familiar book. He folded it, unfolding something in himself with that small movement, and tucked it in his pocket. B, he said. The nickname sounded raw. Why is there a power of attorney with today's date, and my name typed in the agent line? To protect her, she said immediately. Emergency authority if she wanders again. I didn't authorize it. You don't have to, she designates. In my favor, he said, and the consonants didn't wobble. Convenient. Color crept up her neck. Don't take that tone with me, she said low. You wouldn't last a week without me managing the adult things. You follow instructions like a metronome. He flinched as if she had flicked his ear. Daniel, I said, and when he looked up, I saw the little boy and the middle school band kid and the man who had carried Leonard's casket all standing at once. Will you call the police? I will hand them what I have. They will decide the rest. Bianca's eyes flashed white. You will not bring police into this house. She snatched her purse from the chair and swung it onto her shoulder with a practiced turn, a movement like leaving anywhere beautifully. Daniel took out his phone. Sit down, B. She took a step towards the hall. He moved to block her. She changed directions quick as a fish and went for the kitchen. The rug betrayed her. Its corner had curled a little. She caught it with her heel and stumbled. The purse slid. The clasp popped. A thin stack of forms fanned across the floor like fallen leaves. I didn't touch them. Neither did Daniel. We watched them settle care plan, incident statement, medication, compliance log, all pristine, all bearing today's date. Don't, Daniel said again. His voice had dropped into a place that meant itself. He dialed and gave the address and said the words. People say when they are choosing the side of daylight attempted homicide evidence on site, please come. Bianca stood very still. Then she turned that steady, luminous gaze on me, and whatever had been curated for public consumption flickered and burned out. You were supposed to make this easy, she said, and now there was no sugar, only chalk. You were supposed to be grateful. No one answered her. We waited in a rectangle of lamplight while a siren picked its way down the street and stitched itself to the curb outside. Red and blue swung across the sunflowers on the dish towel and made them look for a second like planets. 2 officers entered with the alert politeness of people who see ugly rooms for a living. Daniel stepped back, palms visible. I gave my name. I did not tell a story. I identified objects. Notebook, forms, photos, thumb drive. The officer with the notepad asked permission, and I nodded, and he photographed what I had photographed, each frame wide enough to include the clock and the calendar. I handed him my phone and recited the path of the day until the shape of it existed in his handwriting. He asked me if I needed medical attention. I said no. He asked me again. I said no again. The other officer turned to Bianca. Ma'am, would you sit? Not a question. She stared knives and sat. Is there anyone else in the residence? The notepad asked. No, Daniel said. The words sounded like something kept and then given. They cuffed Bianca only after Daniel showed them the entry in the notebook for today, and the officer on the radio confirmed the 911 log with the timestamp. When metal touched her wrist, she exhaled like a diver breaking surface. This is ridiculous, she told the ceiling. She'll recant tomorrow. She always does. I didn't answer. I watched the officers do their small exact tasks, bag the forms, ask whose printer note the brand and model on the corner, label the thumb drive, request permission to access the files later. The house kept breathing. The radiator clicked. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor's TV laughed at a joke. When they led Bianca past me, she paused. The calm expression, the one she wore for health fairs and vendor meetings, tried to return and couldn't find its lines. You won't keep him, she said, not quite whispering. He breaks. He always breaks. Daniel stood by the mantel with his hands and fists he'd forgotten to unclench. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He looked at the photo of himself in the crooked cap, and then he closed his eyes like a man standing under a bell and waiting for the sound to pass through him. The door shut. The siren unstitched itself and drifted away. The living room became a room again. My water glass sweated a faint ring on the coaster and turned it into a pale halo. Daniel sat across from me. For a long minute, neither of us moved. He put his elbows on his knees and covered his mouth with his hands. I'm sorry, he said into his palms. He said it again, each time smaller, as if he were returning spare change he hadn't meant to take. I reached across the table and set my fingers on the back of his hand, not heavy, not asking. The radiator sighed. The clock went on. He didn't pull away. He lifted his head, and in his face, ordinary and wrecked, I recognized something unbroken that had been there the whole time. Tell me what to do, he said finally, but not to be led, to be useful. Help me gather the pages, I said. We stacked them in the order the officer had left them, corners squared, edges flush. When we were done, there was a neatness on the table that felt like a kind of breath. We squared the last stack, palms smoothing paper as if order could lower our pulse. The lamp made a quiet cone of light over the coffee table. Somewhere down the block, a siren faded, and the street returned to its ordinary traffic, people going home and not knowing our house had tilted. The officers came back, a notepad already open. "Ma'am, sir, we'll need formal statements downtown," the taller one said. "A team is heading to the warehouse with a warrant for documents and digital records. Do you consent to provide the photographs from your phone and the physical items on the table?" "Yes," I said. Daniel echoed me. We watched them inventory notebook forms, thumb drive prints. Each object read aloud, placed in a bag labeled. It was a liturgy of custody. Outside cold bit at my cheeks. Daniel locked the front door and hesitated with the key in his hand as if he had forgotten who we were locking out. In the cruiser, I folded my hands in my lap and counted breath quietly, the way I had in the freezer in 4 hold 2 out 4. Daniel sat forward, elbows on knees, eyes on the officer's shoulder. I wanted to touch his back and didn't. He was a man sitting with his thoughts, and the shape of them belonged to him. At the precinct, they took us to separate interview rooms, soft gray chairs and a carafe of water between paper cups. The ceiling vent hummed. I rested my fingers on the plastic table and named the clock on the wall, white the pen, black the tiles, cream. A woman in a navy suit and an overcoat cut neat as a scalpel introduced herself as Detective Mara Keating. Her hair was pinned without fuss. She shook my hand as if hands should meet level. "I want you to tell me the day," she said, uncapping her pen. "Just the parts you remember. If you don't know something, say so. We can fill gaps with records." I told her, starting with the warehouse door and the breath of cold, then backward to the phone call months ago, forward through the kit on the wall, the narrow opening of the freezer door, the photographs, the office computer, the notebook, the 911 call, the townhouse, the officer's arrival. She didn't interrupt. She marked times and details in a shorthand that ran both fast and legible. When I had finished, she asked for the photos. I handed over my phone. A technician, when summoned, scrolled through, nodding almost imperceptibly when a timestamp overlapped something in his mind. "Do you feel safe?" Ms. Marlowe Keating asked finally. "Yes," I said. It was true in a way that wasn't about doors. "Any injuries?" "No," I said, and watched her write the word anyway, as if paper needed to hold it to make it stay true. She stood. "We'll be a little while. May I bring you tea?" "Hot water would be lovely," I said. "And a slice of lemon if your break room is extravagant." It was. She returned with a foam cup and a wedge of lemon on a napkin. I pinched the lemon, watched steam lift oil from the rind, and thought of Leonard squeezing a lemon into his tea and saying very seriously that citrus could improve most situations if given the chance. On the other side of the wall, voices blurred, and footsteps found their errands brisk and unhurried. When Keating came back a second time, she had a different folder in her hand. "We obtained the warehouse DVR," she said. "Your daughter-in-law, Bianca." "Yes." She called 911 at 3:12 p.m. The footage shows her entering the freezer at 3:08, exiting at 3:09, and then standing by the prep sink for 30 seconds before dialing. She does not open the door after 3:09. Keating's voice stayed even. The logs from the office printer indicate PDFs titled Marlowe Consent and Incident Statement printed between 2:58 and 3:05 p.m. "We will image the computer, but preliminaries match what you described." Her notebook. "Gloves and tweezers," she said. "We'll see what it gives us." She paused, then asked, "You mentioned Dr. Rowan." "My primary," I said. "He is careful. He would not collude. He might be susceptible to someone with embroidered concern. We've put in a request for his statements and notes." She closed the folder. "I'm going to speak with your son now. We'll likely release you tonight. Charges will be filed." "Detective," I said as she reached the door. "On Bianca's porch there is a key safe. There is a locksmith's card in her office with a note about installation. If you find invoices, I let the sentence stay a suggestion." Keating nodded. "We already have the vendor on our list." She added a tiny mark at the bottom of the page and left the room balanced on her low heels, the way ballerinas leave a stage, no drama, just control. When she returned, Daniel came with her. His face looked both older and younger, as if 2 different nights had passed over him at once. He took the chair beside me and shifted forward until our shoulders almost touched. "I was wrong," he said. "It wasn't an apology so much as a classification." "There's a difference between wrong and unkind," I said. "You've never been unkind." I kept my eyes on the lemon swimming a slow yellow arc in my cup. He put his hand on the table, palm down, and I placed mine over it because that needed no permission. Detective Keating sat across from us. "The folder closed now. Ms. Marlowe, Mr. Marlowe, we're placing Ms. Moreno Bianca under arrest for attempted homicide and felony fraud pending review by the district attorney." Moreno, Daniel asked. The syllables sliced the air. "That is the name on her birth certificate," Keating said. "We ran a rapid identity check based on prints taken when she was booked. There are records under Bianca Moreno in 2 states and 1 federal civil proceeding filed under B. Marin. There are also traffic citations under B. Kincaid. Aliases are not crimes by themselves, but they will matter. Daniel stared at the tabletop. How many names do you need to wear before you forget your own? Keating didn't answer that. She stacked her pen on top of the folder, edges aligned. A magistrate will see her tonight or in the morning about bail. We've recommended remand. The freezer footage and the 911 audio don't agree with the narrative she offered. The printed forms with today's date don't help her. I thought of the gel pack wedged in the door and was briefly glad I'd removed it. A prosecutor would not need me to explain. A knock, and the technician returned with my phone, now wearing a small evidence sticker at the corner like a Band-Aid. We mirrored it, he said. Yours to keep. Thank you, I said. My photos were simple things, but simple things often permitted hard things to be said aloud. They released us at 9:30. The lobby smelled faintly of copier toner and winter coats drying. Outside, the night had grown crisp enough to make sounds carry far. Daniel and I stood under the precinct awning, and our breath made pale ghosts that rose and unstitched themselves. I should call Dr. Rowan, he said. Or no, maybe I should not call anyone yet. He looked at me, not asking. Come home, I said. We will drink something warm and use words if they come. We took a cab. The driver told us the score from a game on the radio, as if lives elsewhere needed to be placed for the world to stay balanced. At the townhouse, the tape the officers had stretched across the door hung slack, now cut and looped aside. Inside, the lamp still made its neat circle. The stacks were gone, the table bare. The tidy halo from my glass had dried into a faint ring. Daniel poured water into the kettle and turned the knob. The burner clicked and whooshed. We stood at the counter like people in the middle of packing hands without tasks. When the kettle sang, he made tea the way he had watched me make it for decades without being taught. Bags and water overweight. He placed my cup near, took his own across from me. We did not toast. We just lifted and drank. He began to talk in small pieces. She said Dr. Rowan wanted the screen, he said. But when I called his office last month to confirm, she said she had already spoken to his nurse and I didn't need to worry. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. She said the church had moved the book club. Annabelle told me it was on hiatus and I thought she was being scattered. I hear myself. Scattered is a word people use when they want to be kind, without looking at the clock, I said. You had a lot to carry. I didn't add names for any of it. Naming can wait, breathing can't. His phone lit on the counter with a number he didn't recognize. He fumbled it to his ear. This is Daniel. He listened, then handed it to me. Detective Keating, he mouthed. Ms. Marlowe, Keating said when I lifted the phone. Paper rustled in the background. 2 items you may want to know tonight. First, your doctor returned our call. He says he has not diagnosed you with cognitive impairment. He had noted family concern and planned a routine screen. Second, the locksmith confirmed installing a key safe on the townhouse for Ms. B. Moreno. The invoice shows a note, code set to 4472-53 per client request. We will collect statements tomorrow. That's all for now. Her voice softened by half a degree. Try to rest. Thank you, I said. I replaced the phone and felt something inside me, small and precise, click back into true. Daniel washed the cups and set them upside down to dry. He stood with both hands on the sink, shoulders hinged. I don't know what to do with the part of me that wanted to believe her. He said, not looking up. It's like finding a bruise on a place you don't remember hitting. You learn where the edges are, I said, and took a towel to dry the cups because cups shouldn't catch dust, and also because doing one clean, complete thing helps when everything else is smeared. We left the townhouse lights on and walked the 4 blocks to my house. The porches along our street wore pumpkins and wilting mums, the last parade of fall. On my steps, I paused. Daniel looked at me, hands in his coat pockets, waiting for words. I didn't find a speech. I found the key at the bottom of my bag and put it in the lock. Inside, the air held its familiar mixed lemon oil on wood. The faint iron of the radiator, Leonard's clone, fossilized in the wool of the winter coats. In the hall mirror, I saw us as we were 2 people who had made it to a door at the end of a very long day and opened it. Stay, I said, and this time I did touch his sleeve. The room at the back still has the quilt you like. He nodded, swallowed, and tried to say something and didn't. He went down the hall with his hand on the wall, the way children steady themselves in the dark. I turned off the entry lamp and stood for a moment listening to the house shift and settle, old wood giving up the day inch by inch. In the kitchen, I put my phone on the counter and set an orange beside it, something that could be peeled and understood. The refrigerator hummed. The clock over the sink went on. I looked at the dark window and saw my own face layered with the reflection of the room behind me, the cup rack, the tea tin, the lemon on the cutting board. I touched the glass and it was cold, but not like the freezer. This cold had a house around it. I washed my hands. I folded a towel. I left the kitchen light on low. Then I walked down the hall and paused outside Daniel's door, not quite knocking, listening to the even begin of sleep. When I lay down in my own bed, I did not count breath. I let the day lift and settle in the way quilts do when you shake them once and the batting rearranges without fuss. The lamp clicked, the room held. The night carried us as if it had hands. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.